Welcome back to the Real Mr. Mom. So in this episode, I'm gonna ruffle some more feathers again. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully it's just something we can all learn from, come together with. I was hoping that there's a certain point where I can have this channel grow enough to where I can get feedback and like I said, have people influence what I know. Look at different things. That's, like I said, one of the reasons I love communicating so much about say tough subjects, about controversial subjects, is that's how I learn. So I'm just going to dive right in and calling this segment "Did You Know?" And so this is going to be about just some history involving I don't want to say black culture, but there's just a few things that I've come across and looked into, and again, it's just something where one of the biggest things that grinds my gears involving a lot of subjects these days is that you'll hear somebody make a statement, and then rather than someone find out why they made that statement, what they meant by it, they just they write the life history of this person who said it, and come to so many conclusions, amongst also usually verbally reprimanding and berating somebody because they made this statement, rather than just trying to have a healthy dialogue. Because again, if your end result is, or not your end result, but if your mission, what you're compelled to while you're speaking out and accosting someone, is because you want to combat racism or combat bigotry or combat evil, then again, it's very much like being a parent. You need to do what's effective, not simply that. Like that was one of the things too. And again, it's no one's going to get it perfect, but I've done it myself, and I've when I was a kid, this happened to me, to where it's that whole you cross the line, your butt is mine. And again, if I'm not learning, then your punishment really isn't teaching me anything other than that life isn't perfect, or life isn't all nice. But again, it's if you want to be able to reach out to people, you need to do so effectively. And so on either part of these conversations, if someone's going to be misinformed, I can, verbally accost someone, but are they going to learn? Are they going to listen to what I have to say? Probably not. So again, I just want to jump right in and discuss this term. And again, I trying to be as delicate as I can, but it is what it is. And the term is Uncle Tom. And so for most people, I think probably know what Uncle Tom means, or at least the expression Uncle Tom. And it's essentially an insult to somebody who's black, saying that they're a sellout. Well, again, looking at things and trying to understand why things are the way they are, that was one of the things that I looked into, was that I've heard the term before, and it was funny because when I heard the term, and when I was a little older and I understood it a little more, I remember kind of thinking to myself, well, is that from the book Uncle Tom's Cabin? And in fact is. It's based on the main character, Uncle Tom. And so anyhow, I think, again, because I can't testify to what people's perspectives are, but again, I think where the sellout concept comes from was in the book. Uncle Tom is, I can't remember exactly how he's described, but I want to say he's like dignified. Long story short, he's just, I think the idea is that he's acceptant, or accepts slavery. He accepts his position, and I think the idea is that by his acceptance, he's approving it. And as I've discussed, because you accept something does not mean you approve it. You just accept that it's the reality. And so again, I feel people conflate the idea of him accepting his situation and accepting slavery, or not accepting. Yeah, accepting. I'm sorry. So people confuse his accepting of slavery as his approving of slavery, which he does not. But again, this is the really important thing of why it's so important to look into something. Because again, like I said, the term Uncle Tom is referring to a black person as being a sellout. Well, the interesting thing about this is at the end of the book, Uncle Tom is actually killed because he will not give out the location of escaped slaves. So again, you're just like, that is so much more significant than any type of selling out he might be doing by not resenting, his slave owner. And so again, it's just really important to understand why we say what we say and why we believe what we believe. Because if you're not informed, then you could be using a reference that's actually it's not, I would say it's counterproductive, but it's. I mean, I would think that was a compliment based on the actual story. Like I said, is that he gives his life. He's killed essentially because he will not give up the location of escaped slaves. And if that's a sellout, then I want to be a sellout. I want to give my life for my fellow, my friends. It's that passage that was it? There's no greater love than to give your life for a friend. And so it's just I don't see how that would be in reference to actually a negative thing. It seems like that'd be a positive thing. That would be a badge of honor to be able to give your life for your loved ones. And so again, it's just really important to understand what the context is. And so again, that was the other thing. And let's see if I can hold that thought real fast. I'm gonna look something up. All right, welcome back. Sorry, I believe I found what I needed. But yeah, so this is one of the interesting things that I came across, and again, just taking a step back and analyzing it. And again, too, I realized that not everyone into it might not even be a huge part, but I've heard a lot of, negative responses from parts of the Black community's representation towards I believe he was the first Black actor to be credited in a movie, and I want to say he was the first Black actor who became a millionaire. But I believe his name was Lincoln Theodore Monroe Andrew. And anyhow, so the reason I'm discussing that was that I heard, and again too, I've seen in other representations criticism for how Black actors portrayed Black people in movies. And again, this going back to the term Uncle Tom that's probably what he would have been called by some people, as being a sellout, as being a negative representation, because back then, sadly, in a lot of movies and shows, Black people were portrayed as being simple and being ignorant, or just it was almost like a childlike representation, but they were adults, and so very insulting to the Black people and to Black culture. But again, too, this is something that I just want people to realize and to take a step back, because again, it's I think that's the difficulty of the world we're living in today, is we have access to all this information, but because we have access to so much information, the negativity of that is that we're not going to find anything we're not looking for. And so if we stumble across this guy and we stumble across footage of bad representation of Black people and Black communities, then we're just going to run with that narrative rather than looking into, well, why is it being portrayed? Because in our mindset, rightfully so, there's no excuse. There's no, that is 100% wrong. It doesn't matter, what the context is. Well, by today's standards, and heck, I mean, by 30 years ago, 40 years ago standards, that would not be okay. But again, just to me, if you see someone who's acting out of sorts, again, too, when you look at a lot of these division within our country, about who voted for this person or who voted for that person, just ask yourself why. Why, and be objective. Don't because they're evil, because they're such and such, because they're bigots, and don't come up with these quick answers, because again too, if I was to think that somehow I was surrounded by that many bigots, it would be very overwhelming. And again too, I used to look at life that way. I used to look at life like somehow I was surrounded by a bunch of evil. And then I took a step back and realized, I generally do, like, just from my experiences in life, I've met thousands of people, because obviously I've worked at a bank, I worked at a casino, I worked at, hotels. I've worked with a lot of people, in my jobs, and most people, I would say the vast majority of the people that I meet are good people, even if I don't agree with them. That's one thing I can testify to, is most people I meet are good people. And so, if you're seeing people say things that you don't agree with, or spewing hate that you don't agree with, take a step back and ask why. Don't tell yourself that there's no possible reason. That was one of the things that, not to get too sidetracked, but that was one of the things that I've noticed too, is when you look at tragedies, if you ever like watching 2020 or some true crime show, and I'm not saying that I don't agree with the sentiment, but a lot of times, or every time, somebody will say that there's no reason for this to happen. And it's like, well, there's no good reason for it to happen, but clearly there was a reason, because there wasn't a reason it wouldn't have happened, And so by denying the existence of a reason, you're never going to be able to figure out how to stop it, because you've denied that it could even take place. And so again, when you see, like I said, Lincoln Theodore Monroe Andrew, portraying this sellout type character, ask yourself, why would he have been motivated to do that? Because if you look at it objectively, and this is something I didn't even think about until recently, but you think about what he viewed, his world that he was living in. Before there was him, before he was a sellout for black people, and he was taking money for it. Before that, there was people who weren't getting credited, who weren't getting paid that much, who were sellouts by that standard. And then before that, before black people were acting a fool when they were portraying black people in older movies. Before that, there were white people portraying black people as these stereotypes. So again, so from his perspective, he was progressing things. He was moving things forward in a positive way, because the world he was living in was so much worse. And so that's what people need to realize when they look at history, when they look at these atrocities, when they look at misbehavior, is you can look at it and you can judge it, or you can look at it and ask why and learn from it. And like I was saying with the Revolutionary War, with our forefathers, without the progression of the past, we would not be where we're at. If black people hadn't, quote unquote, been sellouts and given this negative or demeaning depiction of black people, how much longer would it have been before we had, the first black actor and actress get an Academy Award? I think, was it an Academy Award or Oscar? Was Denzel Washington and Halle Berry? I think it was the same year. But again, it's just the success of today would not be possible without the success of yesterday. And so again, that's why it frustrates me to no extent when I see people casting stones at situations and they don't know the full scope of it. I'm not saying that this negative portrayal is a good thing and it should be okay and it should be like, hey, I'm just saying that we can cast stones at it and not learn anything and write it off as being evil, or we can learn from it. We can figure out, why did this happen? Why did it take place? I think that, again, that's just a really sad world that guy must have lived in, where that's progression, where being credited and taking money and making a good living, negatively portraying your people, is progress. That's a sad truth, and yet it is true. And so again, it's important for people to realize that, so that we can understand that, so we can move forward. Like I said, one of the biggest aspects that's people with mental illness and depression struggle with is looking back at mistakes. And so again, I think that's one of the reasons why I don't want people to look back so much on history and the atrocities that happen. Isn't to ignore it. It's not to not learn from it. It's just the fact that we can't correct it if we're constantly looking back. Again, when I look at the civil unrest, and I think how much more we could be doing if we weren't constantly focusing on what we did wrong. We can, like I said, it's important to see what we did wrong so we can correct it. But if that's all we're going to do, then we're going to get nowhere. And again, too, we're going to be worse off because we've mentally depleted ourselves, looking at how horrible things are. And so we just drain ourselves from any kind of motivation, any kind of strength that we can use to move forward. And then we get nowhere. So we're in the exact same place we were yesterday, except for now our city's on fire. That's one of my frustrations with what's going on with the looting and the rioting. It's not to say that the pain behind it, or at the very least, kind of some of the people's pain. I do think there are opportunists out there who are simply just hijacking this cause to invoke fear and invoke violence and invoke their own selfish needs. But for some people, I do think that is, just an emotional response to a situation where they feel like they're not being heard, or that they don't have control, and so they're trying to take control by doing what they think is right, even if it's wrong. But that's what I'm saying, is how much of our assets could we put into fixing communities and correcting things, but we're spending simply on rebuilding things that got burnt down in the name of moving forward. We're not going to move forward because now we've moved backwards. It's one of those things where I don't understand how we're supposed to move forward if we're constantly looking backwards. Like I said, we can learn from it. We can, I agree that we shouldn't deny that it happened, deny that it exists. But if we're just going to be poking at the wound and we're not going to be thinking about how can we heal this wound, how do we correct it, how do we remedy it, then we're not going to get anywhere. And like I said, we're going to be worse off. Because how I'd put it is it's very much like counseling. And I'm not discouraging anybody from getting counseling, but I went to counseling for, I think it was like 10 weeks or something. And at first it did help. At first it was good to get things off my chest. But after a while, I felt like it didn't really get me anywhere because I was opening up these Pandora's box of pain, this Pandora's box of emotions, but I wasn't given any tools on how to remedy it, on how to heal it. It's the first step of healing is admitting you have a problem. But I feel like I feel like we're stuck on the first step. You think about how long, we've been talking about, social injustices and I say racism and all this type of decay in our society. You just think about how long it's been. And I want to say that the Black Lives Matter, I want to say it started back in 2012 or something like that, 2013. It's around 7 years. And I don't feel like we're any further than we were 7 years ago. So again, and I think a big part of it's just that we're stuck on step number one. We're identifying that there's a problem. But I don't feel like we're really progressing to other steps of how we can correct those problems. Again too, it's we need to focus on how do we get the results that we need. It's not as simple as abolishing this or abolishing that or whatever. It's about a combination of many things. And again too, I feel like rioting and looting is the last thing we need to do, because then we're just hurting more people. And again too, that's just going to detract from any type of help we can give to remedy these social issues and these injustices. We have less money to help people in need because of the actions of people that were saying that they were doing it to bring awareness and to bring justice. And it's like, well, we don't have the money anymore because you burnt the city down, and now we need to build the city back up. So again, it's just like, I think it is important to identify that people's pain is real. And to identify that it's not just anarchists that are causing these issues and rioting. It's a lot of real pain. And so when you conflate all the people who are committing these acts as being evil, then people aren't going to see the truth in it. I think that if we can all admit the truth on both sides, we can all move forward. Just like you'd say that so many of the protesters are peaceful and so many of the cops are good cops. So again, it's just one of those things where, by expanding and saying that all cops are bad or we need to abolish all the cops, most people are going to hear that and just be like, no. And so we're not going to make any progress. When as if you said some of the cops are not good and that we need to create checks and balances so that they that people don't feel in fear, and that again too, they don't have too much, so these are arguments we can make and that most people would listen to. Not everyone. I've had these conversations and had people who are fine with the status quo, which I'm not. But at the same hand, it's just like, but if we stick to the truth, we stick to, the pointing out, calling all evil actions evil, and if something isn't evil, not conflating the two, then I think we would make more progress. I think that it's one of those things where, I've talked to a buddy about the, I think it was at 2030. The sun's supposed to fly into us or whatever. That's not exactly what it is, but by 2030 or whatever, if we don't get off carbon or something of that nature. Anyhow, I can't remember exactly the topic, but the idea being is that progress is progress. Us trying to get off of down to zero emissions in the next 10 years is not feasible. That being said, I think if we can get down by 25%, that's a huge jump. And again too, talking about everything I've talked about, progress is progress. And if your mentality is that you're just going to be a stick in the mud, or you're just going to keep, crossing your arms, thinking until I get everything I want, nothing's going to be good enough. And it's just like, progress is progress. Moving forward is moving forward. Obviously, we want to move as forward as we can and as quick as we can, but we shouldn't not move forward at all because we're not moving as forward as much as we'd like. Again, too, that's counterproductive. So again, it's just really important for us to think about why people do what they do, why they have their beliefs, and to not quickly judge. Again, we can all have reactions. If I see a video, if I giving content and I'm told this person did this to this person, I can certainly start to form feelings about it. But these feelings, more often than not, shouldn't be in cement, because if you feel the full scope of it. I remember I was watching a news article, this is years ago, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but about this kid who made a suitcase clock or something like that, and he got in trouble, and and people were talking about how it looked like a homemade bomb or whatever. And anyhow, so the interesting thing was I remember watching the news and kind of, reading the narrative, and I'm like, yeah, it does kind of look like a freaking homemade boom. But yeah, so I just remember, seeing that and just being like, oh, I can see you get in trouble. That's sketchy. I mean, especially with, kids and in schools and the tragedies that take place. And yeah, so I kind of took that in. And then I can't remember how I came across it, but I came across some dialogue between two friends involving that exact story. And it was interesting because it's one of those things where it's my favorite quote from the Disney movie Pocahontas, but it goes, "You'll learn things you never knew you never knew." And it's just a very intellectual, elegant way of pointing out something that's excessively true. Is that, you think about everyone on the planet. They used to think the world was flat. Everybody, the smartest people in the world, thought the world was flat. And so it's like, well, did their consensus, did 100% of the population thinking this one thought make it true? No. And so again, it's just so many different things. You look at life today and just think, well, just because the vast majority of people think this is true doesn't mean it's true. And so that's why it's so important to not, like I said, not put your thoughts into cement. Obviously, we can have strong thoughts and be motivated and talk, but I'm always willing to sway my mind if I hear something that's compelling, that's something that's revealing. And so going back to the situation with the suitcase clock. So this dialogue back and forth was that these two individuals were on opposite sides of the conversation. One thought it was absurd that they were bringing this negative attention, accusing this kid of making a homemade bomb for his school project and so forth. And the other one was thinking, yes, that's what he did. He got in trouble. He should have. The other one was like, no, he shouldn't have. But it was interesting because I was I was reading the story, and this one person pointed out, if they actually thought it was a homemade bomb, why did they have it in the I think it was the principal's office, like just sitting there? Why didn't they call the bomb squad? Why didn't they, and they just pointed out he just sat there in the principal's office waiting to get in trouble, but you're just kind of like, holy crap, they didn't think it was a bomb. Because if they had, they would have certainly called the bomb squad. They would not have just, again, so it's just about how things are framed. There's so many times where I've been given information and I'm just like, oh my gosh, and I fell into the information and kind of reassure myself, but accept it as it's given. And then I look into something and I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I cannot believe that with such little information, I can just write someone off. And again, too, I'm going to start another one, and I'm sure that this is going to be horribly popular, but I'm going to start a different segment, talking about, and again, it's all connecting to mental health, all connecting to how the human mind works, as I find it super fascinating. But I want to start talking about, I don't say murders, but quote unquote murderers, and whether or not I feel that they're guilty based on the evidence, and why I feel like the media, or why the people have portrayed them or thought them to be guilty. But yeah, it's just really interesting stuff. But yeah, so I'm going to be making that in the next, probably not the next episode, but I'll be making that soon. Anyways, as always, good luck. Good night.